At 4:30 a.m. on September 24, 2025, Russia's most powerful warship, worth $500 million, was about to be destroyed by a piece of plywood. For weeks, Novorossiysk had been Moscow's untouchable fortress, a symbol of recovery after losing Sevastopol, Russia's last so-called safe harbor on the Black Sea. But that illusion? It was about to explode, because hidden in the fog, barely 50 feet above the waves, 6 drones made of wood and cheap electronics were screaming toward the port at 90 miles per hour. Too low for radar, too small to matter. Or, so Russia thought, this wasn't just a military strike. This was economic warfare, where $30,000 beats $500 million, where plywood defeats steel, where one anonymous operator, sitting hundreds of kilometers away with a laptop, was about to rewrite the rules of naval combat forever. The question wasn't if Ukraine could strike the fleet. The question was how much it would cost Russia to find out. The Admiral Makarov wasn't just any ship. It was Russia's pride, a frigate armed with Kaliber cruise missiles capable of striking deep into Ukrainian cities. The same missiles that had terrorized civilians for months. Tonight, that weapon of terror was the prey. From the western horizon, 6 AQ-400 Scythe drones thundered low across the Black Sea. At the same time, 3 Mura V-5 unmanned surface boats knifed through the dark waters from the south. 2 of them packed 700-pound warheads. The third? A decoy, broadcasting false signals that screamed friendly patrol craft. 200 miles above, a Ukrainian operator monitored everything through the cold blue glow of a Bayraktar TB2 feed orbiting at 27,000 feet. Every move of this ghost strike was designed to overwhelm Russian sensors, to create chaos so complete that no commander could tell what was real. As one Ukrainian analyst later told the BBC, it wasn't just a drone attack, it was a psychological siege. Within minutes, the first radar alarm blared through Novorossiysk's command post. A massive Podsolnuk coastal radar picked up a fat signal, something large, 50 meters out, racing towards the port. The crew of a Pantsir S-1 battery didn't hesitate. 8 57E-6E missiles screamed into the fog at Mach 3. The decoy Mura boat vanished in a spectacular orange fireball. The Russians cheered. But here's what nobody saw coming. The real threat hadn't even arrived yet. From the west, 6 radar anomalies flickered on secondary screens. So small operators assumed they were birds confused by the fog. In reality, they were the Scythe drones closing in. And here lies the fatal weakness of expensive air defenses. A Panzer system worth millions can track fighter jets. But plywood drones with radar signatures the size of a seagull, they slip through like ghosts. Each Scythe drone cost about $30,000. One Panzer missile, $120,000. Economically, Russia was losing 4-1 before the real damage even began, and they were shooting at shadows. As waves and fog scrambled signals, Ukraine's cheap machines slipped through the cracks of Russia's billion-dollar armor. According to Defense News, this kind of swarm warfare had become Kyiv's signature move, combining low-cost, semi-autonomous drones to dismantle highly sophisticated defense grids. Western observers drew comparisons to NATO's networked warfare doctrine from the 2000s, but at a fraction of the cost. The Ukrainian operator watching Russian missiles annihilate his decoy gave his first command. 2 Scythes released clouds of chaff, tiny metallic strips that multiplied their radar profiles tenfold. 4 others dropped to just 30 feet, using the coastal cliffs as natural cover. Through Starlink uplinks, the Bayraktar relayed exact coordinates of Russian defenses, allowing the drones to strike from blind spots. The trap tightened. Russian crews fired another salvo, more expensive missiles chasing ghosts. The chaff clouds vanished in flames. One drone was lost to shrapnel. But in just 10 minutes, Russia had burned through a quarter of its ready-to-fire missiles, and still hadn't hit the real attackers. By 4:38 a.m., panic spread through the command center. The fog that once concealed the fleet was now its curse. Operators shouted over radio interference. Missiles missed. Radar screens flickered. Ukraine's swarm had successfully broken through the first defensive ring. And then, the invisible war began. At 4:39 a.m., the fog rolled in thicker, as if nature itself had joined the deception. Inside the Novorossiysk command bunker, operators barked orders through static-laced radios. They had just fired a dozen missiles, each worth more than a Moscow apartment, at chaff and shadows. Then came the next phase, the invisible war of frequencies. The Krasuka 4, Russia's most advanced electronic warfare system, powered up. Mounted on a heavy truck, It unleashed a storm of electromagnetic energy, a 186-meter-wide wave designed to fry sensors and blind drones. In the Ukrainian command post, screens went white with static. Signal lost, flashed across every feed. The operator cursed under his breath. His 5 remaining scythe drones were now flying blind, caught in a digital hurricane. But Ukraine had prepared for this. Defense News and BBC analysts highlighted how Kyiv's engineers had learned from Western doctrine, integrating AI-driven autonomy and inertial navigation systems, similar to those in NATO cruise missiles. Unlike Russia's heavily centralized command structures, Ukraine's drones were designed to think for themselves. They switched from GPS to internal gyroscopes and preloaded terrain maps, making them immune to jamming for short bursts. It became a duel of microseconds. The Krasuka 4's jamming algorithm required 100 milliseconds to analyze a signal before responding. Ukraine's drone AI recalculated its position in 50. In modern warfare, milliseconds decide survival. As one Western analyst put it, the Russians were trying to turn off the lights, but the Ukrainians already knew the room by heart. One drone, spinning erratically, came dangerously close to the sea surface, its wingtips slicing the mist. But then, something extraordinary happened. A new signal pulsed through the chaos. The Bayraktar, still high above the electromagnetic storm, spotted the source of the jamming. A truck-mounted antenna array with a heat signature visible even through fog. The operator made a split-second choice: sacrifice one drone to save the rest. He redirected the nearest scythe. The $30,000 machine became a precision missile. It dove towards the Krasuka at 90 miles per hour, slicing through the interference cloud. The Russians thought they'd won. They were wrong. His name doesn't matter. His face, you'll never see. But in a bunker hundreds of kilometers from the Black Sea, one Ukrainian operator was fighting a war with nothing but a laptop, a joystick, and a satellite connection that kept cutting out. His screen had just gone white. 5 drones, flying blind in a digital hurricane. His hands didn't shake, couldn't afford to. Every second of delay meant Russian gunners were tracking, calculating, preparing to shred his machines from the sky. He'd trained for this, simulated it. But simulation doesn't prepare you for the weight of knowing that if you fail, people die. That the Admiral Makarov would keep launching missiles into Ukrainian cities, into homes, into schools. His drone feed flickered back to life. 1 frame, then 2. The Bayraktar had found the jammer. No time to think, no time to second guess. He marked the truck, uploaded coordinates, and reassigned the nearest scythe. On his screen, the drone's altitude dropped. Speed climbed. The thermal signature of the Krasuka 4 grew larger, brighter. Impact. A brilliant explosion lit up his monitor. The jamming signal collapsed instantly. For a brief moment, the Ukrainian control bunker erupted in cheers. But it was short-lived, because Russia had a backup. The Murmansk BN, a massive long-range jamming complex usually deployed for strategic operations, came online. Its spoofing fields spread like a net over the coastline, twisting satellite data and feeding false coordinates into Ukrainian systems. One of the 4 remaining drones veered off course, believing it was somewhere above the Pacific Ocean. It vanished from the feed, lost. Still, 3 scythes and 1 Mura V5 remained operational. The operator leaned forward, eyes locked on the glowing blue screen. The battle was far from over. What unfolded off Novorossiysk wasn't just Ukraine fighting alone. NATO analysts later described this as the first real AI versus electronic warfare encounter in a live battlefield. According to Military Watch magazine, what happened that night could become a case study for how smaller militaries might outmaneuver superpowers through speed and adaptability. This was not brute force, one U.S. Air Force colonel told Reuters. It was a demonstration of how cheap tech and smart design can neutralize systems costing hundreds of millions. Economically, the disparity was absurd. The entire Ukrainian strike package, including all drones and boats, cost roughly $1.2 million. Russia had already expended over $25 million in missiles and jammers, not counting the potential loss of the Krasuka system itself, valued at $10 million per unit. The cost per kill ratio was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, NATO intelligence satellites orbiting above the Black Sea recorded the engagement in real time. Though President Donald Trump refrained from immediate comment, Pentagon briefings later revealed that American analysts were astonished by the effectiveness of Ukraine's hybrid swarm. The attack's implications went beyond the battlefield. It questioned whether NATO's own fleets were ready for such low-cost, decentralized threats. Back on the ground, the Russians scrambled to recover. The destruction of the Krasuka left their coastal sector temporarily blind. They turned to their next line of defense: unmanned combat drones. From an airfield near Tuapse, 3 Orion 10s lifted off. These were Russia's answer to the Bayraktar, sleek, jet-black hunters equipped with KAB-20 precision missiles. Their mission: eliminate the remaining Mura boats and Scythe drones. But the Orions were entering a fog-choked death zone. Visibility was less than 200 meters, and the sea was boiling with false radar returns from debris and electronic interference. The Bayraktar, still high above, became the eye of the storm, its sensors feeding real-time data to the surviving drones below. What happened next changed naval warfare forever. It was no longer just a Ukrainian operation. It was network-centric warfare, the same principle NATO built its doctrine on. The irony wasn't lost on Western observers. Ukraine, not Russia, was now executing NATO-style precision strikes with second-hand hardware and improvised code. As one European defense expert later told DW, the message of Novorossiysk is clear. Technology gaps don't guarantee victory. Agility does. At 4:42 a.m. local time, the battle over the Black Sea entered a new dimension. One fought not in steel or fire, but in data and signal. The Orion combat drones took to the sky. Each machine carried KAB-20 precision-guided bombs worth tens of thousands of dollars, capable of vaporizing small naval targets. Below, the surviving Ukrainian Mura V5 boats and Scythe drones sliced through the mist like phantoms. Inside the Russian control center, the air crackled with tension. Operators stared at thermal screens as white blurs flickered across the horizon. "Target acquired," one whispered. A heat signature glowed briefly on the surface, a Mura boat's exhaust plume piercing through the fog. The lead Orion pilot locked on. Seconds later, a guided missile detached and plunged toward the sea. The explosion that followed tore through the silence like thunder. A column of water and fire shot skyward. The Ukrainian Mura obliterated in an instant. Inside the bunker, applause echoed through the headsets. But that cheer masked a deeper reality. The Russians had just spent over $300,000 in ordnance to destroy a drone boat built for under $50,000. In pure economic terms, it was a hollow victory. At NATO's command center in Brussels, analysts watched the data feed in near real time. Their interest was no longer just in the outcome, but in what it revealed about the future of warfare. "This isn't a drone strike. It's an economic algorithm," said one U.S. defense advisor quoted by Reuters. "Every time Russia fires, it loses money. Every time Ukraine evades, it gains an advantage." Meanwhile, the remaining Ukrainian operator made a stunning counter-move. He ordered the last Mura V5 to cut its engines to a crawl, just 20 miles per hour, and slip beneath the radar horizon, hiding in the troughs of 6-foot waves. But this wasn't luck, it was intelligence. The boat became a ghost on the sea, its signal indistinguishable from the background noise of the storm. Simultaneously, the 3 Scythe drones were instructed to go cold mode, rerouting heat exhaust upward and flying dangerously close to the Krasnodar cliffs to shatter their infrared signatures. The hunters had become the hunted. Above them, the Bayraktar TB2, circling at 27,000 feet, remained untouched by the chaos below. Its sensors cut through the fog with precision, mapping Russian drone activity and transmitting coordinates back to the Ukrainian command post via Starlink. For all of Russia's high-end systems, it was Western communication infrastructure that gave Ukraine its edge, a subtle reminder of NATO's unseen hand behind the battlefield. From his screen, the Ukrainian operator spotted the lead Orion circling low, searching for another Mura. He marked it, uploaded the coordinates, reassigned one of his Scythes. The small plywood-bodied drone peeled off from formation, climbed slightly, and accelerated toward the Orion's flight path. The Russian pilot was focused downward, scanning for targets, completely unaware that death was climbing behind him. At 4:44 a.m., the Scythe made contact. The collision wasn't cinematic, it was mechanical, brutal. A $30,000 drone slammed into a $4 million Orion. The Russian UAV disintegrated instantly, its debris scattering across the sea like burning leaves. In that single moment, Ukraine had flipped the air war. Ukraine didn't just destroy a ship, they destroyed the economics of Russian warfare. But the real question wasn't about this battle, it was about what comes next. His name was probably Dmitry, or Alexei, or Ivan. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that at 4:43 a.m., he was sweating through his uniform, standing behind an AK-630 close-in weapon system, a monstrous 6-barreled cannon capable of firing 10,000 rounds per minute. His job was simple: protect the Admiral Makarov, protect the flagship, protect Russia's pride. But the target he was trying to hit was the size of a motorcycle, weaving in unpredictable AI-assisted zigzags, every turn faster than his tracking computer could calculate. It was a race between man and machine, between reflex and algorithm. For 20 seconds, he fired non-stop. The barrels glowed white-hot. Tracer rounds lit up the sky like a demonic fireworks show. Each second consumed hundreds of shells, literally burning money and hope at once. Then the ammo drum went empty. The gun fell silent. The Ukrainian drone was still coming. As the CIUS reloaded, the Muravi 5, now only 10 miles out, released its final payload of chaff, creating a massive radar echo. A phantom fleet appeared on Russian screens. The gunner swung his cannon toward the illusion. It was a fatal mistake. Up in the sky, the Bayraktar painted the Admiral Makarov's launch tubes and fuel depot with an invisible laser. One final scythe adjusted its course. He never saw it coming. The drone didn't aim for the bridge or command tower. It dove towards the pierside fuel depot. When it hit, the screen in the Ukrainian bunker went white. The explosion wasn't just loud, it was elemental. A focused jet of molten copper, propelled at 8,000 feet per second, pierced the steel fuel tank. Within 1.3 seconds, a chain reaction erupted across the pier, sending walls of flame surging towards the Makarov's hull. What followed was physics, not luck. The intense heat warped the Caliber missile guidance systems, effectively melting their launch mechanisms. The ship's left side turned into a burning wall of blackened steel, and the world was watching. The missiles that once terrorized Ukrainian cities were now dead metal tubes. Reports later confirmed that the strike didn't sink the Makarov, but strategically, it might as well have. The frigate was crippled, unable to sail or launch missiles. According to Al Jazeera's defense desk, this single Ukrainian strike neutralized one of the Black Sea Fleet's last operational surface launch platforms. In 1 hour, Ukraine had achieved what months of Western sanctions could not: degrading Russia's naval deterrent through sheer innovation and nerve. NATO's response came swiftly. The alliance's intelligence division circulated classified assessments to member states, labeling the Novorossiysk operation as a proof of concept for asymmetric drone warfare. Defense analysts from The Guardian and DW highlighted how Ukraine, with a shoestring budget, had done what NATO itself had long theorized but never tested under fire: defeating superior forces through distributed AI-linked swarms. From Washington, President Donald Trump addressed the situation in a late-morning press briefing. His tone was unusually measured. "This shows," he said, "that wars today are no longer about who has the most ships, but who can think the fastest. The United States is watching this very closely." Behind that statement, the Pentagon launched a quiet review of U.S. naval vulnerability to drone swarms, something the Rand Corporation and CSIS had warned about for years. Back on the Russian coast, panic spread across Novorossiysk. Fuel tanks burned out of control, sending thick plumes of black smoke visible from 30 miles away. Civilian workers fled the port. Satellite images released by Reuters later confirmed the scale. Half the harbor engulfed in flames, several vessels damaged, and logistics hubs rendered inoperable. The economic cost? Estimated at $350 million in direct damage and untold losses in disrupted oil shipments. For Russia's economy, already battered by sanctions, the attack was more than a military setback. It was a symbolic collapse of maritime security. The Black Sea ports were lifelines for energy exports. Now they were targets. Insurance rates for Russian shipping tripled overnight. By week's end, several Western tanker firms refused to dock anywhere near Russian-controlled waters. Plywood and Starlink defeated the navy of Peter the Great. Her name was classified. Her rank, irrelevant. But in a Pentagon briefing room at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time, she was watching the Novorossiysk operation unfold in real time via satellite relay. And she was terrified. Not for Ukraine, not for Russia, for the United States. Because if a handful of Ukrainian drones, costing less than a luxury sedan, could cripple a Russian naval base defended by billions of dollars in air defense systems, what did that mean for American carrier strike groups? She ran the numbers. A single U.S. aircraft carrier, $13 billion. The escorts, aircraft, personnel, another $20 billion per strike group. Ukraine's entire attack package, $1.2 million. Russia's material losses, 650 million and counting. Cost ratio, 1 to 500. She typed a single line into her classified report. If $30,000 drones can defeat $500 million frigates, what happens to our $13 billion carriers? Within 72 hours, that question rippled across NATO councils, congressional defense committees, and naval war colleges. The answer wasn't comforting. Traditional deterrence, the idea that overwhelming firepower guaranteed security, was crumbling in real time. A $500 drone could now threaten a $50 million tank. A $30,000 UAV could destroy a flagship. And the world's most sophisticated navies could be blinded by a handful of code lines. The defense balance had shifted permanently, from mass to precision, from brute force to algorithmic intellect. Russia, humiliated but not defeated, began repositioning what remained of its Black Sea assets. Intelligence from Jane's Defense Weekly later revealed that several vessels were quietly transferred northward under heavy escort, effectively abandoning Novorossiysk as a frontline naval base. It was a withdrawal cloaked as strategic redeployment. But to observers, it was retreat, clear and irreversible. Ukrainian media celebrated the strike not as revenge, but as proof of innovation. The operation cost Kyiv roughly $1.2 million in total hardware, less than what Russia spent firing just a single wave of Kaliber missiles at civilian cities. Defense News summarized it succinctly. Ukraine didn't just destroy a ship, it destroyed the economics of Russian warfare. But beyond the celebration, a deeper conversation began across global military think tanks. If Ukraine could destroy a navy with plywood and software, what would stop non-state actors from doing the same? How could NATO defend its own fleets in the Mediterranean or Pacific against similar swarm attacks? Western experts warned that a new age of asymmetric deterrence was dawning. The power of fleets, air bases, and missile shields was no longer measured in tonnage, but in adaptability. Cheap, intelligent, and expendable weapons had become the great equalizer. As the fires in Novorossiysk raged into daylight, Russian commanders faced an unthinkable reality. The age of traditional dominance on the Black Sea was over. The Admiral Makarov still floated, but as a ghost of its former glory. The Ukrainian operator leaned back, exhausted, watching the flickering thermal image of the burning harbor. His mission was complete. But as NATO satellites and Pentagon analysts dissected every second of the operation, one haunting question loomed. Was this victory a glimpse of the future, or just the calm before a far deadlier storm? By sunrise, the once quiet port of Novorossiysk was unrecognizable. Columns of black smoke twisted into the pale dawn sky, visible from miles away. The sea itself shimmered with an oily rainbow, as wreckage and scorched debris drifted across the harbor. The Admiral Makarov lay crippled beside the pier, hull blackened, launch tubes twisted like molten metal. But while flames burned on the coast, a different kind of fire spread through military headquarters across the world, a fire of panic and fascination. For NATO observers stationed in Romania and Poland, the implications were immediate and profound. If a handful of AI-driven drones could devastate a fortified Russian port, what could similar technology do to Western fleets anchored in the Mediterranean, the Baltic, or the Pacific? A British naval strategist, quoted by BBC defense correspondent Jonathan Beale, summarized it bluntly. Ukraine has demonstrated the democratization of destruction. You no longer need a navy to sink one. The Novorossiysk strike on September 24, 2025, marked a historic shift in modern warfare. So what happens when the next swarm takes flight? Ukraine's low-cost, AI-driven drones and unmanned boats overwhelmed Russia's advanced air defenses and crippled the Admiral Makarov, turning a $500 million warship into molten steel for less than $1.2 million. The operation demonstrated how speed, intelligence, and coordination, not scale, defined victory in the age of algorithmic combat. The attack's ripple effects were immense. Global oil prices spiked, NATO re-evaluated its defense doctrine, and Russia's naval confidence collapsed. Western analysts from Reuters, BBC, and Defense News hailed it as the first real-world test of autonomous warfare. President Donald Trump called it a wake-up call for all modern militaries. As NATO and the Pentagon scramble to adapt, the world faces a sobering truth. Warfare is no longer about weapons alone, but about data, code, and innovation. The era of expensive invulnerability is over. A $30,000 drone destroyed a $500 million flagship. Plywood defeated steel. One operator with a laptop rewrote naval warfare. And the question that burns through every war room, every briefing, every boardroom. If a handful of Ukrainian drones could destroy a Russian fleet, what happens when the world's next superpower swarm takes flight? Subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking chapter.